Human hid the injured alien girl in his shed. Her presence triggered a planet-wide search warrant. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. Jack Anderson had always lived a simple life. Nestled in a quiet corner of rural Michigan, his days consisted of tending to his small farm and working on odd jobs. He was the type of man who found comfort in the familiar, the sound of his tractor engine, the gentle rustling of the leaves in the trees, and the quiet rhythm of daily life. Jack didn't mind the solitude, in fact, he enjoyed it. His only company were the occasional visits from neighbors or the odd call from his sister who lived a few states over. His life was predictable, and for Jack, that was exactly how he liked it. But that all changed one cold, misty evening in early November. Jack had just finished up a long day of work, his muscles sore from hours spent in the fields. As he was walking back to his house, he noticed something strange. There, lying on the edge of his property near the tree line, was a figure. At first, he thought it was an animal, maybe a deer, or some kind of wild creature. But as he got closer, his heart began to race. It was a girl. Her skin was unlike anything Jack had ever seen, a pale silvery hue, almost glowing faintly in the dim light. Her eyes were shut tight, her body twisted in a way that made it clear she was badly injured. Jack's first instinct was to turn around and run, to call for help or alert the authorities. But something stopped him. He wasn't sure what it was, but as he looked at the girl's fragile form, he knew he couldn't leave her there. His mind raced with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? And most importantly, what in the world had happened to her? Without wasting another moment, Jack carefully knelt beside her, his hands trembling slightly as he checked for a pulse. To his relief, he felt the faintest of heartbeats. She was alive. That was when Jack made the decision that would change everything. He couldn't explain why, but he knew he couldn't let her go. He didn't know what would happen next, but he had to protect her. He gently scooped her up in his arms and, with all the strength he could muster, carried her back to his shed. The small wooden structure was far enough from the house to remain hidden, yet close enough that Jack could keep an eye on it. He laid the girl on an old mattress he kept there for when he worked late into the night. As he stood there, looking down at her, he wondered who, or what, she really was. The sound of the wind outside seemed louder now, almost as if it was warning him. But Jack ignored it. For reasons he couldn't quite explain, he knew he couldn't turn back now. He had already made his choice. Jack sat there in the dim light of the shed, staring down at the strange girl who now lay unconscious on the mattress. Her breathing was shallow, but steady. Her silver skin shimmered faintly in the moonlight that filtered through the cracks in the shed's walls. He had never seen anything like it. He had lived his whole life in this rural part of Michigan, where strange things rarely happened. But now, here he was, with a girl who wasn't from this world, injured, and vulnerable. Jack's mind raced with questions. Who was she? What had happened to her? How had she ended up here, in the middle of nowhere? He thought about the news reports he had seen earlier in the week, about strange sightings in the skies, and rumors of unidentified flying objects. But he had never imagined that one of those objects could have been connected to this girl. He paced around the shed, trying to think of what to do next. The last thing he wanted was to get caught up in something bigger than he could handle. But at the same time, he couldn't just leave her there. He felt responsible, almost as if he were the only one who could help her. Jack had no medical training. He knew the basics, how to patch up a cut or treat a sprained ankle, but nothing that would help him treat a being like her. Still, he couldn't just do nothing. After a few minutes, Jack found a first aid kit he kept in the shed. He returned to the mattress and knelt beside her, carefully cleaning her wounds. Her skin was unlike anything he had ever touched, soft, almost metallic, but warm to the touch. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of creature she was. Was she human? Was she even from this planet? Jack gently wrapped the bandages around the cuts on her arms, trying to be as gentle as possible. As he worked, his mind kept drifting to the strange glowing light he had seen coming from her eyes earlier. Had it been some sort of energy? A power? And what had happened to her? Jack didn't know, but he was certain that she was in trouble. Whoever or whatever was after her would not stop until they found her. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. After he finished tending to her wounds, Jack sat down on a nearby crate and waited. The girl didn't stir. The minutes dragged on, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something big was happening, something far bigger than he could ever imagine. It felt like the world was shifting beneath his feet, and Jack was caught in the middle of it. He glanced at the clock on the wall. It was past midnight now. The night had settled into an eerie stillness. Jack couldn't remember the last time he had felt so uneasy. He had always trusted his instincts, and right now, they were telling him that something was wrong, that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet understand. He looked back at the girl. She was still unconscious, but there was something about her that kept him from turning away. It was almost as if she was calling out to him, even in her sleep. Jack sighed and ran a hand through his hair. He didn't know what to do. All he knew was that he couldn't let her go. He couldn't leave her alone in this strange, dangerous world. Jack's thoughts were interrupted by a faint noise outside the shed. It was soft at first, almost like the wind. But then it grew louder, footsteps. Someone or something was approaching. Jack's heart skipped a beat. His mind raced. Who could it be? And what did they want? He glanced at the girl on the mattress, then quickly stood up, moving toward the door of the shed. The footsteps were getting closer. Jack's mind screamed for him to act, but he didn't know what to do. He had no weapons, no plan. He was just a simple farmer, stuck in the middle of something he couldn't understand. And yet, he knew he had to protect her. He had no choice. Jack's pulse quickened as the footsteps grew louder. He wasn't sure if it was the wind, his nerves, or something else entirely, but something told him that this moment was the beginning of something far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he stood frozen by the door, straining to listen. The footsteps outside were slow but deliberate, the sound crunching on the dry leaves that covered the ground. Whoever it was, they were getting closer. He glanced back at the girl on the mattress. She still hadn't moved, her silver skin glowing faintly in the moonlight. Jack didn't have a plan, no weapons, and no real idea of who or what was outside. All he knew was that he had to protect her. The footsteps paused. Jack held his breath, willing the noise to stop, to fade away. But it didn't. Instead, a voice called out from the dark. "I know you're in there." It was low, steady, almost mechanical. Jack's spine stiffened, a chill running down his neck. The voice wasn't human. He couldn't explain how he knew, but something about the tone was wrong, unnatural. Jack's mind raced. Should he run? Hide? He didn't know what to do. His eyes darted to the only other exit in the shed, the small window near the back. It wasn't much, but it was a way out. He considered bolting for it, but then he thought about the girl. He couldn't leave her. The voice outside spoke again, this time more forcefully. "I said, I know you're in there. We've been tracking her." Jack's stomach dropped. They weren't looking for him, they were looking for her. The girl. Whoever these people were, they weren't just a random search party. They knew exactly what they were after. Jack's mind raced as he took a step back from the door, his eyes scanning the small shed for any way to defend himself, any way to keep the girl safe. There was nothing. Just tools, empty crates, and old equipment. He had no choice but to face whatever was out there. But he couldn't bring himself to open the door. He had no idea what these people wanted, or how dangerous they might be. Another voice, this one slightly softer, but still authoritative, joined in. "We don't want to hurt you, but if you don't open up, we will be forced to take more drastic measures." Jack's stomach twisted. He could hear the warning in the voice. It wasn't a threat he could ignore. Slowly, cautiously, Jack backed away from the door, his mind scrambling for a solution. But all he could think about was the girl, lying helpless in the shed. He didn't have time to think of a perfect plan. He just had to act. Jack glanced at the window again. Without thinking, he rushed toward it, prying the wooden frame open with shaking hands. He quickly pulled the curtain back and peered out, scanning the area. It was dark, but there were shadows moving near the edge of the property. He couldn't see clearly, but there were at least 2 figures. He had to act fast. Jack turned to the girl, his heart racing. He didn't have much time. "Come on," he whispered, trying to shake her awake. She didn't stir. Jack gently placed his hand on her shoulder, shaking her a little harder. "Please, wake up," he muttered, his voice filled with urgency. For a moment, there was nothing. And then, just as the voices outside called out again, the girl's eyes fluttered open. Her glowing silver eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, Jack forgot to breathe. She was awake, but she didn't move. She just stared at him, her gaze intense, as if she were processing everything. Jack didn't know what to say. He didn't even know if she could understand him. But the urgency in the situation was clear. "We have to go," Jack said, his voice low but firm. The girl's gaze shifted toward the door, then back to Jack. She didn't seem to be scared, but there was something else in her eyes. Something that made Jack feel like she knew more than he did. She stood up slowly, her movements graceful but cautious. Jack reached out, ready to help her if she stumbled, but she didn't need it. She was strong, more than Jack had expected. As she stood beside him, her presence seemed to fill the room, like she was something more than just a person, something otherworldly. The voices outside grew louder, and Jack knew they didn't have much time. He grabbed the girl's hand, pulling her toward the window. "We need to move," he said urgently. She nodded, as if understanding him completely. Without another word, they both climbed through the window into the cold night air. Jack's feet hit the ground with a soft thud, but before he could even turn around, he saw movement at the edge of the trees. The figures were getting closer. Jack's pulse quickened as he grabbed the girl's hand again, pulling her into the darkness. They couldn't stay here. They had to get away, fast. Jack and the girl sprinted through the tall grass, their feet pounding the ground as they ran deeper into the woods. The cold night air bit at Jack's skin, but he barely noticed. His mind was consumed with the thudding footsteps behind them and the growing sense of urgency. He could feel the girl's hand gripping his, her fingers cool but strong, and he had the strange sense that she was more aware of their surroundings than he was. She wasn't scared, not like he was. Her movements were steady, almost as if she had done this 100 times before. The shadows in the trees seemed to shift as they moved, but Jack couldn't stop to look. They had to get farther away, out of sight. He glanced over his shoulder, but the figures he had seen earlier were nowhere in sight. Still, Jack knew they were being pursued. He could hear the distant sound of voices, now raised, calling out in the darkness. The search had begun. "We can't stop now," Jack whispered, urging the girl forward. She nodded, her silver eyes scanning the trees ahead. Jack felt a sense of unease creep into his chest. He didn't know who was after them, but it wasn't just some random search team. There was something more to this, something Jack couldn't yet understand. He could feel the weight of their pursuit pressing on him, the feeling that they were getting closer with every step they took. The woods around them were dense, the trees thick and twisted, making it harder to see more than a few feet ahead. Jack's breath came in short bursts, his lungs burning from the effort, but he refused to slow down. He had no idea how long they had been running, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, the girl stopped, tugging gently on his arm. Jack stopped in his tracks, turning to face her. She was looking up at him with those glowing silver eyes, her face calm but serious. Without a word, she pointed to a narrow path that wound deeper into the woods. Jack hesitated, but the urgency in her eyes told him there was no time to question her. They had to keep moving. He followed her down the path, his heart racing, praying that they were making the right choice. As they moved, the sounds of pursuit seemed to fade, the footsteps growing quieter. Jack dared to hope they had lost their pursuers, but he knew better than to let his guard down. The woods were vast, and they were still vulnerable. The girl moved ahead of him, her steps light and quick. Jack tried to keep up, but his legs were growing heavier, his energy running low. He had never run like this before. His muscles were sore, his breath ragged, but he couldn't afford to stop. The girl suddenly halted again, turning to face him. She pointed upward, and Jack followed her gaze. Above them, the trees opened up into a small clearing, and there, in the center, was a small, glowing orb, hovering just above the ground. Jack froze. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, a faint, pulsing light that seemed to hum with energy. The girl walked toward it, her gaze locked on the orb. Jack stayed back, unsure of what to do. His instincts screamed at him to be cautious, but the girl was already reaching out toward it. As her fingers brushed against the orb, the light grew brighter, and Jack felt a surge of warmth flood through him. He gasped, the sensation overwhelming. The orb seemed to respond to her touch, and in that moment, Jack realized something he hadn't fully understood until now. This girl, this alien, was not just running from something. She was looking for something. The orb pulsed again, and Jack stepped closer. The girl's eyes turned to him, her expression softening for the first time since they had met. She was no longer the mysterious, unshakable figure she had been. For a brief moment, she seemed almost human. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice soft but clear. Jack's heart skipped a beat. Her words, in perfect English, were the first Jack had heard from her since they met. But before he could respond, the sound of footsteps interrupted them, familiar, heavy, and closer than before. They had found them. The footsteps were getting closer, and Jack felt his heart race again. He could hear them now, 3 or 4 people, maybe more, moving quickly through the woods. The sounds of their boots crunching on the dry leaves and the brush around them made it clear that they were closing in fast. Jack glanced at the girl. She was still focused on the orb, her hand gently touching it, her silver eyes glowing brighter with each passing moment. The warmth from the orb was still radiating through the air, and for a second, Jack wondered if it had some kind of power. Was it going to help them escape? Was it a weapon? He wasn't sure, but the girl seemed to know exactly what it was. She turned to him again, her face unreadable, but there was a quiet urgency in her eyes. "We need to move," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with a sense of finality. Jack nodded, swallowing hard. His body was still on edge, every muscle tense, ready for whatever was coming. He didn't question her anymore. He didn't have time to. He pulled her away from the orb and led her back into the woods, away from the clearing, deeper into the darkness. The figures were still behind them, moving fast, but Jack couldn't risk looking back. He needed to focus on getting them both out of there. The girl moved with him, her steps light, but her gaze darting back every few seconds as if sensing something. Jack felt the same way. Something was closing in on them, something dangerous. He didn't know if it was the orb or something else entirely, but whatever it wasn't going to let them escape easily. The voices from the search party were louder now, but they still hadn't caught up. Jack could feel the weight of their pursuit pressing on him like an invisible hand, but he didn't dare slow down. He couldn't afford to. "Where are we going?" Jack whispered, not sure if she could hear him over the sounds of their running. The girl didn't answer right away. She just kept moving, her gaze fixed ahead. Jack couldn't help but feel a little lost, following her without knowing where they were headed. But then, after a long pause, she spoke again, her voice barely audible. "There is a place, a safe place." Jack didn't have time to ask what she meant by that. He just kept running, trusting her instincts over his own. The terrain was becoming rougher, the ground uneven, but the girl seemed to navigate it effortlessly. Jack stumbled, his foot catching on a rock, but he quickly righted himself. His legs were burning from the effort, but he pushed through it. They were getting farther away from the sounds of pursuit, but Jack knew they couldn't stop until they reached this safe place the girl had mentioned. Minutes passed like hours, and the sounds of the search party seemed to fade as they pushed deeper into the forest. The only noise now was the rustling of leaves underfoot and the occasional branch snapping in the distance. Finally, the girl stopped, holding up her hand to signal Jack to stop as well. They had reached a small, hidden clearing, surrounded by thick trees and dense brush. Jack looked around, still breathing heavily, but there was something about this place that felt different, calmer. "We should rest here," the girl said, her voice calm but firm. Jack nodded, still unsure of what was happening, but too tired to protest. They both sank to the ground, Jack's back pressed against a tree as he caught his breath. He could feel his heart still pounding, the adrenaline still coursing through him, but the immediate danger seemed to have passed. For now. He looked at the girl. Her silver skin shimmered in the faint light, and her eyes were closed, but she didn't look tired. She looked focused, like she was waiting for something, listening for something. Jack didn't know what to say. He felt the weight of the last few hours settling in on him. What was going on? Who were these people chasing them? And what did the girl want with that orb? He wanted to ask, to get answers, but he was afraid of what the answers might be. He didn't know if he was ready to hear the truth. The girl opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. "You're safe for now," she said softly. "But we can't stay here long." Jack swallowed hard. "Why not? What's going on? Who are they?" The girl's expression softened slightly, but there was still a distance in her eyes. "They're coming for me," she said simply. "And if they find me, they will take me back. I can't let that happen." Jack didn't fully understand, but the seriousness in her voice was enough to tell him that whatever was happening was far more dangerous than he had realized. He nodded slowly, the weight of the situation sinking in. He was in deeper than he had ever imagined. And there was no turning back now. The girl's words hung in the air, and Jack couldn't shake the weight of them. They were safe for now, but the danger was far from over. He sat there on the ground, leaning against the tree, trying to process everything. His mind was spinning. Who were these people after the girl? Why did they want her so badly? And what was she doing here, on Earth, in the first place? Jack glanced at the girl, who was now standing a few feet away, her silver eyes scanning the forest around them. She seemed calm, collected, as if this was all part of the plan. Jack, on the other hand, was anything but calm. He had been dragged into something he couldn't possibly understand, and now, he was left with more questions than answers. After a few moments of silence, the girl spoke again, her voice low but firm. "I need to find a way off this planet," she said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Jack's eyes widened. "Off this planet? You mean, like, back to wherever you came from?" The girl nodded. "Yes. But it's not going to be easy. They've tracked me here, and they won't stop until they have me. I can't let them take me back." Jack didn't fully understand, but the desperation in her voice was enough to make him want to help. He couldn't let her face whatever was coming. Alone. "So, what do we do now?" he asked. "We need to get to the edge of the forest," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "There's a signal I can send out. It's my only chance." Jack nodded, his mind racing. He had no idea what kind of signal she was talking about, but he didn't question her. He stood up slowly, his legs still aching from the run, but adrenaline had taken over. He was ready to move. "Lead the way," he said. Without another word, the girl started walking, her steps light and swift. Jack followed close behind, trying to keep up. As they moved through the forest, Jack couldn't help but notice how different the girl was from any person he had ever met. She wasn't like anyone he knew, she was more than human. Her movements were almost too graceful, and her senses seemed heightened, as if she was always aware of everything around her. It was both fascinating and unnerving. Jack wondered what else she could do, but he didn't ask. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. After what felt like an eternity, they finally reached the edge of the forest. The trees parted to reveal a small clearing, and in the center, there was a strange metallic object embedded in the ground. It looked like some kind of communication device, but it was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. The girl walked up to it, her face serious, and placed her hand on the surface. The object hummed softly, and Jack could feel a faint vibration in the air. "This is it," the girl said, turning to Jack. "Once I send this signal, I'll be able to contact the people who can help me. But we have to hurry." Jack didn't question her anymore. He stood by her side, watching as she worked. The object's humming grew louder, and Jack felt the energy in the air shift. It was as if the ground beneath him was vibrating, like something was preparing to happen. The girl looked up at him, her silver eyes meeting his. "I hope this works," she said quietly. Jack's stomach twisted with anxiety. What happens if it doesn't? The girl didn't answer right away. Instead, she focused on the device, her fingers moving over the surface with precision. "If it doesn't, we'll have to move again. And they will be even. Closer next time," she said, her voice steady but with a hint of concern. Jack's heart raced. He didn't want to think about what would happen if they failed. The girl's hand hovered over the device, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, with a soft beep, the device activated. A bright light flared from the center, and Jack took an instinctive step back. The girl didn't flinch. She watched the light intently, her gaze unblinking. "It's done," she said, her voice soft but filled with relief. Jack exhaled, his body finally able to relax for the first time in what felt like hours. But the feeling of relief was short-lived. In the distance, Jack could hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps, closer now, far too close. The girl turned to him, her expression hardening. "We don't have much time. We need to go." Jack felt the weight of her words, but before he could react, a low, ominous sound echoed through the trees, a sound that didn't belong. The air around them seemed to thicken, and Jack felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Something was coming. And it was not human. The low, ominous sound reverberated through the trees, sending a cold shiver down Jack's spine. It was unlike anything he had ever heard, a low hum mixed with a mechanical whine, almost as if something large and heavy was moving through the forest. His instincts screamed at him to run, but the girl didn't move. She just stood there, her gaze fixed on the shadows beyond the clearing. Jack followed her eyes, scanning the dark trees, but there was nothing. The sound grew louder, closer. Whatever it was coming fast. "What is that?" Jack whispered, his voice barely audible. The girl's silver eyes flickered in the direction of the sound, but she didn't answer right away. "It's them," she said softly. "They've found us." Jack's stomach tightened. He could feel the weight of her words. The pursuers, whoever they were, had been closing in, and now they were almost upon them. The girl turned to face him, her expression serious but calm. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice steady. "We need to get to higher ground. Now." Jack didn't hesitate. Without another word, he turned and sprinted toward the trees, the girl right beside him. The forest was dense, the branches overhead thick with leaves, but Jack pushed through, his heart racing. He had no idea where they were going, but the girl seemed to know exactly what she was doing. Her movements were swift and sure, as if she had navigated these woods 1,000 times before. Jack's breath came in short bursts, his muscles burning from the effort, but he forced himself to keep moving. The sound of pursuit was still behind them, louder now, and Jack could feel the ground vibrating beneath his feet. He glanced over at the girl, but her expression remained unreadable. She wasn't looking back. She was focused on something ahead, something only she could see. After what felt like an eternity of running, they reached the edge of a steep hill. The trees thinned out, revealing a narrow path that led upward. The girl stopped for a moment, looking back toward the clearing where they had just been. The sounds of pursuit were getting closer, and Jack could feel the tension in the air. Without a word, the girl began to climb the path, her pace unbroken. Jack followed her, his legs aching, but he pushed himself forward. As they ascended, the sounds of the forest grew quieter, replaced by the faint rustling of leaves underfoot. The path wound around the hill, steep and uneven, but the girl moved effortlessly, as if she were part of the forest itself. Jack struggled to keep up, his chest tight from the exertion, but he refused to fall behind. He had to keep up. They reached the top of the hill just as the sounds from below stopped abruptly. Jack's heart skipped a beat, and he froze, scanning the dark landscape below. The clearing was empty now, the eerie hum replaced by silence. "They're here," the girl said, her voice tense. Jack turned to look at her. She was staring at the horizon, her expression hardening. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The girl didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into a pouch at her side and pulled out a small, glowing device. It was the same kind of object she had used earlier, the one that had sent the signal. She held it up, and Jack could feel the faint energy emanating from it. "This will protect us for a short time," she said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "But it's not permanent." Jack watched her, still trying to process everything. She seemed so sure of herself, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. They were just buying time. The girl turned the device in her hands, her fingers working quickly as she adjusted the settings. The air around them began to hum, and Jack felt a shift in the atmosphere. The ground beneath his feet seemed to pulse with energy, as if the device was creating a barrier, a shield of some kind. For a moment, everything went still. The wind stopped, the sounds of the forest disappeared, and Jack felt an eerie sense of calm wash over him. But then, he heard it. A faint, low whirring sound, almost like the hum of a motor, coming from below. The girl's eyes widened, her expression hardening. "They've found us," she said, her voice tinged with fear. Jack turned to look down the hill. At first, he couldn't see anything. But then, out of the shadows, came a figure. It was tall, its body clad in dark armor, its movements unnatural, mechanical. Jack's heart raced as the figure stepped forward, its glowing eyes fixed on them. He knew, without a doubt, that this was no human. And he had no idea how they were going to survive what was coming next. The figure on the hill was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. It was tall, impossibly tall, and its movements were stiff and mechanical, as if it wasn't quite alive in the way humans were. The armor it wore seemed to absorb the moonlight, giving it an eerie, shadow-like appearance. The figure's glowing eyes locked onto Jack and the girl, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. Jack's pulse raced, his heart pounding in his ears as he realized just how much danger they were in. The girl beside him didn't flinch, her gaze steady, but Jack could feel the tension in the air, like something was about to snap. She reached for the device in her hand, her fingers tightening around it. The hum of the energy field around them grew louder, vibrating in the air. "What is that thing?" Jack whispered, his voice shaking despite himself. The girl didn't look at him, her attention fixed on the figure below. "A hunter," she said, her voice low and controlled. "They are sent to capture or eliminate." Jack swallowed hard, the reality of the situation hitting him like a punch to the stomach. This wasn't just some search team. This was something far worse. "Are we going to be okay?" he asked, the words feeling hollow as soon as they left his mouth. The girl's eyes flickered for a moment, and for the first time, Jack saw a flicker of uncertainty. "I don't know," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the device. "But we have to try." The figure moved again, taking slow, deliberate steps toward them. Jack's throat tightened as it got closer. The girl stepped forward, placing herself between Jack and the figure. Her body was tense, ready for whatever was coming, but Jack could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't going down without a fight. The glowing eyes of the figure seemed to intensify, like it was scanning them, trying to figure out its next move. Jack held his breath, praying that the device the girl had activated would hold. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't be enough. He could feel it in the way the air was thick with tension, like something was about to break. The girl suddenly raised the device, and a brilliant flash of light shot out from it, forming a barrier between them and the approaching figure. The light pulsated, rippling in waves, as if it were a shield of energy designed to protect them. Jack flinched at the brightness, the light almost blinding him, but the girl remained unfazed. The figure stopped, its eyes narrowing as it seemed to assess the barrier. For a moment, the forest was silent, the only sound the faint crackle of the energy shield. Jack didn't know what to expect, but he held his breath, waiting for the next move. The girl's face was set in a hard, focused expression, her eyes never leaving the figure. She seemed to be calculating something, deciding how to proceed. Then, without warning, the figure moved again, but this time, it wasn't just walking. It was faster, more aggressive, its arms outstretched as if it were reaching for them. The girl's eyes widened slightly. She quickly adjusted the device, and the shield pulsed again, stronger this time, as if amplifying its power. The figure hesitated, clearly unsure how to proceed, but Jack could see the frustration in its movements. It wasn't used to being stopped. The girl took a deep breath, her hand still gripping the device tightly. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice steady despite the tension. Jack nodded, his heart racing. He could feel the energy in the air shifting again, and he knew the figure was going to attack soon. The girl glanced back at him, her silver eyes locking with his for a brief moment. "When I say go, we run. As fast as you can. Do you understand?" Jack didn't have time to respond. He just nodded, the adrenaline flooding his body. The figure moved again, quicker this time, as if it had reached its limit with the shield. The girl's face was set in determination as she adjusted the device one more time. A bright flash of light erupted from the device, and the air seemed to crackle with energy. The figure stumbled backward, but it didn't stop. It was still coming. "Go!" the girl shouted, and without thinking, Jack turned and ran, his feet pounding against the ground. He didn't look back. He couldn't. All he knew was that they had to get away. The forest blurred past him as he pushed himself harder, every muscle in his body screaming for rest, but he didn't slow down. He could hear the girl's footsteps behind him, steady, unwavering. They had to outrun whatever that thing was, but Jack didn't know if they could. The sound of the figure's pursuit was growing louder, but the girl's pace didn't falter. She was right behind him, and together, they pushed forward, deeper into the woods, not knowing where they were going or what would happen next. All Jack could focus on was the pounding of his heart and the desperate hope that they could escape before it was too late. Jack's legs were on fire, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but he couldn't afford to slow down. Every footstep echoed behind him like the sound of something relentless, something that wasn't going to stop. The girl was right behind him, her movements fluid and precise, as if she was made for this, but Jack felt every second of the chase weighing him down. The forest around them was a blur of dark shapes and twisting paths, but Jack didn't care about direction. He just ran. His mind was consumed with one thought: escape. He didn't know how much farther they could go, how much longer they could keep running. His heart hammered in his chest, his legs growing weaker with each step. But when he dared to look back, he saw the figure coming, not far behind. It was relentless, its glowing eyes locked onto them, a predator closing in. The girl didn't falter. She didn't slow down. Jack could feel her resolve, her determination to survive, and it gave him strength. The forest grew denser, the trees closer together, but it didn't matter. They had to keep moving. The girl turned her head slightly, her silver eyes glinting in the moonlight. "We need to reach the ridge," she said, her voice cutting through the sound of their footsteps. Jack barely heard her over his own breath, but he nodded, knowing it was the only chance they had. "What's at the ridge?" he managed to ask, his voice tight with exertion. "A way out," she replied simply. Jack wasn't sure what she meant, but he didn't care. He just had to trust her. They kept running, the sound of their pursuer never far behind. The girl's pace never faltered, and Jack pushed himself harder, his muscles protesting but refusing to give up. Then, as if the forest itself had decided to aid them, the path began to clear. The trees thinned out, and Jack saw rise ahead, the outline of a ridge cutting across the sky. Hope surged in his chest. They were close. The sound of footsteps behind them grew louder, more urgent, and Jack could feel the presence of the figure drawing near, but the ridge was within reach. He could almost taste the air change, the fresh, open space ahead. They just had to get there. "Keep going," the girl urged, her voice sharper now, pushing Jack forward. He pushed harder, his legs protesting, his body screaming, but he didn't stop. The ridge was closer now, and Jack could see the moonlight spilling over the edge, the ground rising to meet them. He could hear the figure's footsteps now, louder and faster, almost upon them. The girl's voice rang out again, more urgent than before. "Now." Without thinking, Jack pushed himself over the final incline, his feet hitting solid ground as he surged forward. The girl was right beside him, her pace unwavering. As they reached the top of the ridge, Jack glanced back one last time, only to see the figure emerging from the trees, its form looming, its glowing eyes locked onto them. The girl didn't hesitate. She reached for the small device in her hand, and with a quick movement, activated it again. The air around them crackled with energy, and Jack felt the ground beneath his feet tremble. The figure stopped just short of the ridge, its glowing eyes narrowing. Jack could see the frustration in its movements, the way it paced at the edge of the barrier the girl had created. It wasn't going to get any closer. For a moment, everything was still. The air hummed with tension, but the figure didn't move, its presence almost suffocating. The girl didn't take her eyes off the figure. "We're not safe yet," she said quietly, her voice calm despite the danger. Jack didn't understand. How could they not be safe? They were on the ridge, the barrier was up, and the figure couldn't get any closer. But the girl was right. They weren't safe. Jack could feel it in the air, the way the energy around them pulsed, and he knew it wasn't over. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice hoarse. The girl didn't answer immediately. She just stood there, watching the figure carefully. "Now," she said, finally turning to face him, "we wait. And we hope the signal we sent reaches the right people." Jack didn't know who those people were, but at that moment, all he could do was nod. The night was quiet now, the hum of the energy barrier the only sound as they stood at the edge of the ridge, waiting for what would come next.